Hello, so I'm ACC Rhiannon Kirk from Gloucestershire Constabulary, and I'm here today to talk about actions on ACEs in Gloucestershire. You're going to hear from myself, you're going to hear from Superintendent Emma Davis, Inspectors Emma MacDonald and Guy Blanford, and then lastly from Paul Stevenson, who chairs our Action on ACEs panel. And I'm going to concentrate today on how we have put ACEs into practice. So just to talk about our strategy, this is all about changing the questions and the conversations that we have with young people. So it's what's happened to you rather than what's wrong with you. Making sure that that happens in the community so that we are then starting to build hope with those young people, and we show them kindness and compassion, we listen, and that then starts to build resilience with those people. So who are their trusted adults? You'll hear a lot of that when we talk about the practical examples that we've done. Who is that person that somebody can trust and talk to and be their role model? And through that, building that community, the resilience, the hope, we then want to produce viral change. So how does that happen? Well, if we're all passionate about ACEs, and we all are, and it's that common language, and we have those personal connections with people and professional connections amongst all of us, and we want to feel part of that community, then actually that grows and grows, just like a virus. And this year of all years, I think we all know how a virus spreads, but this is in a good way. So this is that small set of behaviours from a small group of people initially becoming that bigger network of influence and producing that viral change. Well, I'll hand over to Emma now to talk through how we've done some of that.
Thank you. So as part of the strategic group, there were a number of things and an action plan that was created. And one of the things really was identify tools as per the image on your screen to aid people's understanding around what ACEs meant for them, both in terms of as an individual and also in terms of partners. So these are just examples of what we produced. And these were then taken and they were then piloted by a number of different agencies. And basically the organisations and agencies, whether statutory, voluntary or those within the community, actually use these to aid everybody's understanding in how ACEs can be applied to everyday activities. Now these tools were also taken then to a voluntary association engagement event in September of 2018, then further taken to an engagement event for wider partnerships and a conference in November. And then in the December through to the July, we undertook roadshows across Gloucestershire and across the partnerships on voluntary and community sector to show how ACEs could be adopted and really try and progress that viral change and understanding. Okay. In addition to that, then one of the big elements around embedding this was around training. Now, the slide you've got on your screen will highlight different elements of training that were delivered both to the community sectors and voluntary sectors, but also to some of our statutory agencies. And Emma and I, who will speak to you in a moment, both were part of that training delivery. So we were training partners on behalf of the ACEs strategic group, but embedding that in everyday training activity and making sure people understood what ACEs was. And this enabled us to have that common language. And I think it's important to note that ACEs is a common language now in Gloucestershire amongst our partners and our communities. Thank you. And one of the things we did on those engagement events and from the conference was this pictorial. Now, this for me and others really represents a clear understanding of what ACEs is about, the impact on trauma and what we can do collectively and in collaboration to deal with and provide resilience to both adults and children. Thank you. Next slide. So for me, the stories of our success have been working in partnership but also in the organisation. How we took this forward in the organisation in particular was introducing it into several areas of our work, which both Guy and Emma will talk about shortly, and building that slowly and getting an evidence base of how we used it. We then promulgated that out to our partners and working with them, and you'll see some of the stories there it cuts across all our statutory and voluntary and charity organisations. And it's provided a clear platform, really, on how we adopt ACEs and join that with other elements around becoming trauma-informed and also restorative practice. But I'm going to hand over now to Emma first to talk about Operation Mamushi and how we then turned what we were doing into practice.
Okay, so putting ACEs and all the work we've been doing into practice, Operation Mamushi is an example of that. So Operation Mamushi was a mapped organised crime group where young people have been identified as being exploited by older adults in the community to deal drugs, both inside Gloucestershire and in the bigger cities. The recruitment that was taking place was by older males within our communities, and there were significant risk factors associated with what these children were doing. We then undertook a mapping sort of process, which is the picture that you see with all the little pictures on the screen in front of you. That process enabled us to identify who was involved and to look at the information that we had on those children. There was over 30 children involved in Operation Mamushi, and we used information that we held on police systems initially to establish their ACE score. By doing that, it meant that we could focus on the vulnerability and the exploitation elements of this organised crime group. And by having a common language with our partners, it enabled us to coordinate a strategic meeting with partners from social care, housing, youth support team, and also people from the voluntary and community sector. We shared information at that meeting, which included the ACE score for the children that were involved, and wanted to win the hearts and minds of partners to get them on board with what it was that we were trying to achieve. It required a real change in approach from the police and also from partners to focus on prevention and intervention as opposed to sort of pursuit of the organised crime group that we traditionally have done within the police. That change of approach and using the common language of ACEs along with some pursuit tactics enabled us to reduce the overall risk of this organised crime group from one of the highest in the region to one of the lowest in 5 months. The approach that was used in incorporating ACEs and that partnership approach when dismantling an organised crime group was then recognised by the region as best practice, and the training has been delivered to other forces about how to adopt a similar approach in a similar situation.
Thank you. So a few other ways in how we've incorporated ACEs into our work here in Gloucestershire. Children's First is a deferred prosecution scheme for young people under the age of 18. A young person, when they've committed an offence, if they've taken some responsibility for that offence, they are eligible to come through to our Children's First panel. Now, the panel, again, is a multi-agency panel. We have police, social care, youth support team, victim support, Restorative Gloucestershire, and also the mental health service for Gloucestershire as part of that panel. And within that panel, we obviously hear the victim's voice throughout, but we also hear about the child who's offended. And we look at their ACEs and also how that could impact their behaviour. So we then create a bespoke programme through youth support team or Restorative Gloucestershire or whoever they're going to be working with moving forward, with the aim to stop criminalisation of children and to give them the best chance of a good outcome in the future and as adults. So when we sorry.
What do you have to say?
What do you say? Retake. Oh, sorry.
No, don't worry.
I lost my thread.
So retake Children's First.
Okay, Children's First is a deferred prosecution scheme for young people under the age of 18 here in Gloucestershire. When a young person's committed an offence and they've taken some responsibility for that offence, they're then eligible to come through to Children's First. We hold a weekly panel, which is a multi-agency panel. It includes the police, youth support team, the mental health service, the victim support team, Restorative Gloucestershire, and we come together and we discuss each case. We hear the victim's voice during that panel, but we also look at the child who's offended. And as part of that, we look at their ACEs, and around their ACEs, we then create a bespoke program for each child. And we're finding that to be very successful indeed. The whole ethos of Children's First is to prevent reoffending and to reduce the possibilities of those children continuing to take the wrong path in life. So that has been really successful here in Gloucestershire, and I think we can say with confidence that we see the child first and then we see the offence second, and our reoffending rate is incredibly low here in the county. Thank you. We also have a project here called the Aston Project. Now, the Aston Project is a work for reward scheme for young people. It was set up in 2011 after Lynn Aston, who was a police officer who sadly died. Lynn was passionate about working with young people and ensuring that they had the best outcomes they possibly could in adulthood. So the Aston Project is run by PCSOs and also volunteers from Gloucestershire. The referral process through is a form that needs to be filled out, and that can be from a teacher, from a parent, from a youth worker, from anybody really who thinks that a young person would benefit from being on the Aston Project. Part of that referral system now includes looking at a young person's ACEs. And in reality, if a young person has a number of ACEs, they are more likely to get onto that project. The success of the Aston Project is that the young person will be working with a PCSO or a volunteer who will be that trusted, secure, safe adult for them to work with. That person, that trusted adult, will hopefully encourage, inspire, and make sure that that young person is supported fully. Many of the young people that come through to us end up working as volunteer leaders as well, so it has been hugely successful. The other thing I wanted to mention to you was our Exchange project, which is a violence reduction project. Now, our police crime commissioner has funded Young Gloucestershire, who are a charity here in the county, to look at violence reduction. So we meet every 2 weeks, and again, it's a multi-agency panel where we look at young people who particularly have started to get involved in criminal exploitation, sadly. So we're looking at the young people on the edge of criminality and look at what we can do to try and divert them from their activities and how we can support that young person. Again, we look at their ACEs and we look at what is happening to that young person and what has happened to them in their lives. We look at their behaviours often as a symptom, not the cause of their behaviour. So we work with that young person and they're offered a mentor. So they have one-to-one support from a trained adult who is there for as long as they need to support them and to guide them through life and to hopefully find, through the strength-based work that they do, try and find an activity that will divert them away from their activities and to find out what works for that young person. So those are just a few of the projects that we have here in the county where ACEs are absolutely embedded in those policies and schemes.
And lastly, we'll hear from Paul Stevenson, who's going to talk as the chair of our Action on ACEs panel in Cheltenham Borough Homes.
Hello, my name is Paul Stevenson and I have the privilege of being chair of the Gloucestershire Adverse Childhood Experiences, ACEs, panel. I was part of the original panel back in January 2018 and I joined then in my position as Chief Executive of Cheltenham Borough Homes, an arm's length management organisation which manages approximately 5,000 homes on behalf of Cheltenham Borough Council. I retired last August, so my current position now is as a layperson. The panel composition intentionally was to bring together colleagues from different sectors, so statutory, voluntary and community, and that has proved in time to be behind the major success of the partnership, based on developing a social movement and around the concept of viral change. The panel very quickly proved itself to be my best ever experience of collective working, largely because of the passion and commitment of the members. Within CBH, we knew that many of our customers and communities were suffering from poverty, deprivation, trauma, and I felt it necessary that we rethought our approach, which was already very supportive. We primed that response to ACE awareness by creating a pilot project in the St Paul's community of Cheltenham, one of the historically deprived communities, but one where we already had a presence and we had an understanding. We created a new post of Family Investment Officer to work very closely with a small number of families who had agreed to be part of the project. This very intensive work revealed severe levels of historic trauma based on the ACEs indicators. It also enabled increased partnership working from other agencies who were already involved in providing family support. The results generated were really inspiring by individuals and families and life-changing, but they weren't without quite a lot of bravery and challenge. Seeing the benefits that were achievable led to a culture change within CBH to become a person-centred business for colleagues, customers, communities and partners. Achieving greater understanding of personal circumstances enables a very different relationship to be built. It also enables those who are involved to feel more valued, listened to and involved. The transition does need support and awareness training, as it involves a very different approach. Perhaps the strongest benefit has been the creation of community ambassadors who themselves have become a person of trust and a responsible person for people who are maybe missing that in their life and often being sufferers of trauma. The panel has continued to develop our strategic approach during this incredible year, much because of the commitment from partners, but also because we recognise that families and communities are still increasingly vulnerable and subject to traumatic impacts. One thing that the panel hasn't lost sight of is its key messages, which are about resilience and hope. Thank you.